Michael. Good morning and welcome to Morning Brew on Labour Social. It is Tuesday, unusually, the 5th of March 2024. I hope you're all well. Today I just want to talk a little bit about Labour and how they're doing at the moment overall. I think everyone's got their own opinion on this. But here's mine. In the last couple of years, there's been, I sort of see... I see Starmer not as kind of like as Indiana Jones adventurous type, but as this really meticulous, more sort of like Mike from Better Call Saul, diffusing all these bombs and avoiding all these pitfalls and booby traps that have been set by the opposition. The opposition to Labour, in particular the Tories and now the SNP. And he has had, someone has described it as him trying to walk across a frozen lake with a priceless Ming vase or something, which it is in a way. And it's not just down to him, but it's down to the entire Labour Party. And I think one of the things that has changed a lot in the last couple of years while Starmer's been leader is the cohesion in Labour has got better than it has been for years, which is a really important factor in getting people to vote for Labour, because they'll look at most people are just not that interested in politics, or if they are, they're kind of moderate. Like most people aren't at the extremes, and they'll look at what's happening and they'll see the Tories absolutely in absolute dysfunction at each other's throats. Tories not standing in the next election, being sacked, being recall petitions going in over their criminal activity, and the backbiting with the former prime minister standing up in conferences and saying that the country's actually being run by the rogue glitterati or something. And it's kind of like, you do know that your party's been in charge for the last 14 years, right? Okay, but then there's no more difficult tightrope to walk for anyone in the public eye right now than the situation in Gaza. And this was put into sharp relief, I think, over the weekend. I think it was Sunday. I don't know if you've seen a clip of Natasha Devon in tears on the radio saying, "I don't know what you want from me. I'm being accused of being anti-Semitic and I'm also accused of being Islamophobic at the same time. What do you want from me?" And I think the reason why, when we look at the polling on people's attitudes, is Labour getting it right on Gaza? The vast majority say no. I don't think that's necessarily because they're not getting it right, per se. I think it's because there's no right answer to this. If you go in too hard and say that Israel and declare it a criminal state and say that its government and its army has committed war crimes, then you'll keep the left wing happy, but you open yourself up to accusations of anti-Semitism. But also, probably more importantly, it's not really, it's not appropriate for the legislature of a country to declare something that I'm sure is going to be decided on in the future in the International Court of Justice, in the same way that if there's someone's on trial for murder, it doesn't help people sharing memes of them saying this person is a murderer, because it can bias the jury or whoever's adjudicating this. So you've got that one. If you go in too hard on Hamas, then obviously you can be accused of being Islamophobic, because everyone agrees what Hamas did was absolutely reprehensible, beyond imagination, the suffering that they caused the Israeli people. But that doesn't justify in any way, shape or form what the Israeli army and what the Israeli government have done to Gaza. They've gone full Putin on Gaza. They have done what Putin did in Grozny, in Chechnya. They have leveled entire cities. They ain't there anymore. They're just rubble. There's nowhere for people to live, to work, to eat. There's nothing. It's just been reduced to rubble. Like, northern Gaza is effectively, ghost towns. We're talking about ghost cities here. And now most of the population is hemmed into Rafah in the south, near the border with Egypt, and the Israelis are attacking Rafah. So there's no easy answer. There's no solution to this issue. That seems like such tame a word. So what's Keir Starmer to do? Well, he's got to try and negotiate this middle path, and Labour have to negotiate this middle path. They have to make sure that they don't come across as too extreme on either side. And there's two incidents in the last couple of weeks that really show Keir Starmer's capacity for quiet statesmanship that I think really stands him in good stead. One of which, I know there's going to be contention of this in the chat, I'm sure, if anyone's watching this is a massive SNP supporter. But what happened a couple of weeks ago with that SNP Opposition Day motion that accused Israel of war crimes? There were two words in there saying collective punishment. That accused another state that we're allies with, nominally, of war crimes. A state that we provide weapons to, believe it or not. We're one of the biggest weapons supplier in the world, by the way, if you didn't know that already. And Labour, as the government in waiting, they knew that Labour couldn't go for that. The rest of it, all the rest of the text, absolutely fine. In fact, Labour's amendment went further in terms of points of action than the SNP, and went further the SNP motion in the first place. It enhanced the motion, and it wouldn't have got through at all because it's an opposition day motion, and the Tories weren't going to vote for it, and Labour couldn't, or at least enough Labour MPs couldn't vote for it because the front bench wouldn't vote for it. But the SNP were planning on, what they were hoping for, was a repeat what happened last year with people on the front bench and other MPs saying, look, I'm going to vote with the SNP motion because I want a ceasefire. And Keir Starmer managed to make that not happen again, which, look, in the great scheme of things, like it makes no difference. The Israelis aren't going to stop doing what they're doing. Benjamin Netanyahu is not going to stop doing what he's doing until probably the Americans pull rank and actually push for effective sanctions against Israel to stop what they're doing, which is, it's ethnic cleansing. It is ethnic cleansing. I mean, it just is. I think that's a term that we can use in this situation because it doesn't necessarily bring up any of the historical trauma of the Holocaust, because that wasn't ethnic cleansing. It wasn't called ethnic cleansing. And I remember at the time in the 1990s when I think that term came to prominence, and it was to do with, first of all, Rwanda in 1994, but also what was happening in the breakup of the Balkans of Yugoslavia. That term started being used, and at the time I was like, but it's genocide. It's obviously genocide. But this new term came in, which is ethnic cleansing, which is, in a way, I don't like it. It sounds like a sanitized version of what they're doing. Cleansing, that's clean? What is it? Is there going to be soapy bubbles involved? No, there's going to be blood and suffering and turmoil, and no. But I'd rather they didn't call it that. But looking at what the legal definition is of what Israel are doing right now, I'm quite confident and happy to, I'm not happy, but I'm confident in saying that it is ethnic cleansing. But I'm not a politician. I'm not in government. I'm not someone who's going to have to send ambassadors to negotiate with Israel in the future. Because it's not like at the end of this, Palestine's going to stop existing and Israel's going to stop existing. We could be taking steps in the right direction. Like a big one for me is the recognition of Palestine as an independent state, as a sovereign state. It's something we should have done years ago. We should have done that in the 90s. It should have been part of the accords that we came up with in the 90s. And as a result of that, we should have said, yeah, Israel is one country, Palestine is another. And then they could be defended in a way that they can't, while the Palestinian areas are still not quite seen as countries. What are they? Are they enclaves, breakaway regions? I don't know. But the fact remains that Israel's still going to be there at the end of all this, and we're still going to have to negotiate with them. And that's why that happened. Now, something happened this last week, which was the Tories, bizarrely, this desperate attempt by Rishi Sunak to make Keir Starmer and Labour look bad by racing back and saying, "Oh, there's too much extremism. There's too much extremism." Um, and you know what? To an extent, well, I'll just tell you what happened. Starmer just shrugged and said, "Yeah, I agree. Too much extremism on the right and the left," which the Tories like, damn, because they were trying to manufacture one of their stupid little culture wars. They were trying to manufacture tension between Labour and Starmer saying one thing and the party faithful feeling something else, and the MPs feeling something else. But he didn't. And do you know what? To a certain extent, like Sunak's, although I hate the idea of curtailing protests, I do think that there should be exclusion zones around MPs' family homes or their homes, just full stop. Abortion clinics, places like that, there should be definite exclusion zones where you're not allowed to protest. And I'll tell you why. My partner's youngest suffers from anxiety. And I could only imagine what it would be like for her if she left the house to go to school in the morning and there was a group of angry protesters screaming that I was a murderer, I was causing genocide. They were holding up placards with pictures of dead children on the placards. Do you know what I mean? Like, her seeing that, because that's not about me. That's not about my being able to handle that if I was a public figure in a way that MPs are. I guess you have to be a little bit hardy to that. But to put the families of MPs who've done absolutely nothing wrong through that, it feels a bit... You know, in North Korea, if you commit a capital offence, they'll kill you and they'll kill your children to kill out the gene that made you commit that offence. Yeah, it feels a bit like that. Like, are we gonna say collective punishment is a bad thing? Yes, we are, because it is a bad thing. But at the same time, we can't accuse Israel of that because of diplomacy, legal issues. And secondly, if we're going to complain about Israel doing that, then we can't exactly do that to other people. So, as much as it pains me to say it, I kind of agree with Rishi Sunak on this up to a certain extent. I'm pissed off that my right to protest has been curtailed by the Tories. I'm hoping that's something that Labour will overturn when they're in power. But here's the most important thing. It's not the most important thing in my life. That's the most important thing. Right now, I need the Tories out of office. They need to be gone. There's a fantastic article on The Guardian the other day. It was like the Tories' reign of terror. They didn't quite call it that, but that's what it was. In 10 charts, and it was just it's a very enlightening but also deeply depressing read about like literally everything that the Tories have done has turned to shit. The economy is on its arse. Public services are on their arse. Infrastructure's crumbling. There's no investment. There's no foreign direct investment because of Brexit. Our trade is down because of Brexit. We're just not competitive on the world stage anymore. We're actually going to hit 70 million people. 70 million people population, right? We're going to hit it a decade early. Why? Because the Tories have opened the door to anyone who wants to come here, as long as they're not from the EU, because we desperately need more people in the country to look after the older people who are too old to work now, but also to keep the economy from completely collapsing. This is gaffer tape time. Do you know what I mean? They are holding up our entire economy by gaffer tape, because what they're doing is they're going, okay, we can't grow the economy, but what we can do is grow the population. The more people who are here of working age who are working, the population, the economy will at least stand still, which is what it's been doing. But what that means for us as individuals is that our wages have stagnated since 2007, have not gone up at all. And also the cost of living at the same time has gone up massively. And also our GDP per capita has gone down massively. It's gone down by about 10% from what it was in 2007. So if you were earning the same wage as you are now in 2007, that money would have gone a lot further. Think about how much more money £1 million was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire 20 years ago than how much it is now. I mean, it will barely buy you a house in London these days. One house, not several. So, yeah. Interestingly, just a little side note. So the SNP and the Tories seem to have been ganging up on Labour in the last few months, which is understandable. It's politics. The SNP see Labour as a threat. They don't see the Tories as a threat. In fact, if the Tories stay in power in Westminster, it's kind of good for the SNP because they can go look at the state of that. Look at what's happening in England and Wales. But for us in England and Wales, that's not great. Okay, it's not great. And the SNP will still be in charge. You know, at the end of this year, they'll still be in charge in the Scottish Parliament. Okay, so Scottish matters, they'll still be in charge of that. But there's a good chance that their representation in Westminster will be taken down to about 30 rather than the number it is now. I think it's in the 60s. Um, and you know, I've honestly, I get why they're doing it, but it is at the same time incredibly frustrating that it feels like they're sort of taking it out on a progressive party that would do the people of Scotland a much better service than the Tories ever did being in charge. Because the economy of Scotland is inextricably linked to to the economy of England. It just is. So the worse England are doing, although that might be satisfying for a few Scots and a few, you know, independent Republicans, Liverpoolians. At the same time, you've got to think, no, this is all connected. And if someone in Scunthorpe is on the breadline, that's not going to improve the life chances of someone growing up in Glasgow. So yeah, it would be for the benefit of the entire country, obviously, if Labour get in the next election, but not to the benefit of the SNP. So I get that. And I get why they're doing what they're doing. I just wish they weren't. The Tories, I find it now kind of, you know, you just sort of sit back and smirk. Everything the Tories are trying to throw at Labour, Rwanda, trans panic, these culture war bullshit, this, you know, we've been taken over by the wokerati, and trying to, you know, push those culture wars and immigration, which they can't even talk about now because immigration's gone through the roof while the Tories have been in charge. All those things, like every time they try and throw something at Labour and say, ha, take that, you. Labour have just been like, they're like the cat in the meme, you know, where you got the woman screaming and then there's a cat just sitting there having its dinner going, Starmer's like the cat. Not the Lib Dems, though. The Lib Dems are like the dog that didn't bark in that Sherlock Holmes story. Why aren't they making more of a stink about what Labour are doing, especially about, say, green policy? The Greens are also having a go at Labour quite a lot. I didn't write that one down. The Greens, oh my god, they've been doing some quite hefty attack ads over the last few months, but not many people see them because it's the Greens. Yeah, and again, it's kind of like, yeah, I know Labour aren't perfect, and I never say they are, and I will never say they are. But at the same time, the Greens, I mean, you want a greener future? Okay, well, you don't want that with the Tories then, do you? I mean, seriously, Rishi Sunak opening up the Rosebank oil field, giving away over 100 new oil licenses for drilling in the North Sea. Money that's not going to come to us. Money that's not going to give us cheaper oil or gas, because that's not the way it works. It's sold at an international price on the international market. We pay the same as everyone else, no matter whether it comes from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Angola, or from north of the Shetland Islands. Doesn't matter. But yeah, the fact that the Lib Dems are not kicking up a stink about Labour tells you that there is some kind of quiet agreement that's been come to between the Lib Dems and Labour to carve up what remains of the Tories' flank? No, not flank. What's the right word for it? The Tories. I don't know. I watched Society of the Snow last night. I probably shouldn't be talking about carving things up. Anyway, so the Lib Dems, I think, have got to deal with Labour, and if they work with Labour, i.e., you know, not openly because that would be against electoral rules, but they can have a non-aggression pact like what Tony Blair and Paddy Ashdown had in 1997, which worked marvellously because it got the Tory MP number down to 150. And yeah, just to finish off this little monologue, and I'll get to the super chat in a moment. Thanks very much for that, Tinkernazer. I'll come to that in a moment. Labour are now 27 points ahead of the Tories. 27 points. And if that gets translated into an actual election, we'll be seeing Labour on over 500 seats, which I think is a bit too much. However, it won't be the same in 2029. So I'll be happy for them to get that many seats just this once and then bring in PR so they don't lose everything that they've built. Because the way that first past the post works is that Labour get in, they change everything for the better, they make you proud of being British again. Oh my God, like I was talking about this the other day. I was listening to Suede, Dogman Star, came out 30 years ago, 1994, and that brutal soundscape of loneliness and desolation, this feeling that we just couldn't do anything right, like we were just failing on every level. And it felt like, from the Suez crisis, which was before I was born, obviously, but right through to Eddie the Eagle Edwards, the fact that we didn't win the computer wars, the fact that we didn't get the internet before everyone else, the fact that we invented the modern computer effectively, the Manchester Mark I in Manchester, Alan Turing. We condemned him to death for being gay. Really great job there, Britain. And then effectively. And then we go through the 60s and 70s, and we're making some of the best music in the world, and we've got the best film directors in the world. We've got David Lean and Alfred Hitchcock, and Charlie Chaplin, and Ridley Scott. Can we capitalize on any of this? We've got the biggest movie franchise ideas ever. We've got Lord of the Rings. We've got Harry Potter. Oh God, let's not talk about Harry Potter though. We've got James frickin' Bond. Can we capitalize on that? No, we can't. And the 90s, growing up in Liverpool, and this post-industrial malaise of it was just painful. It was how can I describe it? It was just this feeling I never felt particularly proud of my country at that point. I never even thought about the empire because I never knew the empire. But I could see why the older generation were like, oh, it was great when we had the empire. Yeah, because it's so shit now. But then when Labour got in, they really did turn things around. And I know we can go on and on about Iraq and it being a massive fuck up, which it was. And I'm not going to ever say it wasn't. And I was against the Iraq war from the start. I thought it was ridiculous that you were trying to put in a regime change by invading a country. Like, you don't like the guy, okay? I don't know, assassinate him or something. Don't murder 100,000 other innocent people for no good reason. More. And yet, domestically, Labour played a blinder, especially in those first 10 years. Our economy doubled. Children were lifted out of poverty like never before. Money was invested in housing. It was invested in education. I mean, one of the missteps of that Labour administration was the fact that they didn't invest enough in public transport, but that's another story. But generally speaking, overall, I mean, look back, look at those graphs, look at those charts, look at what Labour achieved and did for our country. And by 2012, I felt like actually proud. I felt like proud of this country for the first time in my life. I thought we could actually win stuff. We could actually put on a show and it would be good. Do you remember the Millennium celebrations? They were shit. And then 12 years later, we're putting on the Olympics and we put on an amazing show. And it proved that we could do stuff. But there was a dark side to that as well, because it got people's heads too big. And they thought, well, we're fine. We can do anything we want. We can leave the EU. We'll be okay. Wasn't really the message that you should have taken from the Olympics there. Tarquin, or whatever your name is. Right. Anyway, so just in conclusion to my little bloody hell 25-minute monologue. Take that, James O'Brien. Despite everything that the Greens, the SNP and the Tories have thrown at Labour, despite Judge Galloway, oh my God, let's not even talk about him, they're still 27 points ahead in the polls. That doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to have a landslide. Doesn't even mean that they might not even win. Things could change drastically, radically in the next couple of months. But by the looks of things, not only are the Tories going to get beaten in the next election, they're going to get annihilated. The latest polling data suggests they'll be left with 25 seats. The Lib Dems will have 60 seats. The SNP will have about 30. That means that the Lib Dems will be the official opposition, asking questions in PMQs. And then the SNP will be in exactly the same position they are in now, because the Tories will be the fourth party. Wow. And wouldn't we all like to see that? Tinkanator, thank you so much for the £10 super chat. I really, really appreciate that. The fact that IDF soldiers can post TikToks of themselves dancing while committing war crimes just so how complicit the West truly is in this 75-plus year genocide. Extremist thrives when moderates fail. Yeah, I think you've got a good point, and I think there's very, very few people out there now still who are happy with justifying how far Israel has gone with this. There were many of us who were disgusted from the start, like this isn't the way to deal with this. But you want to also realize, sort of think about the fact that whenever something like this happens, so 9/11, the Americans quick, we need to murder some people. And they went into Afghanistan to get rid of the Taliban, apparently, which they didn't actually do. And there was some tenuous link between the Taliban and 9/11 because they had let Osama bin Laden have terrorist training camps in Afghanistan. But to be honest with you, I mean, those guys learned to fly the planes in America. It had nothing to do with them being, going to boot camp and learning how to crawl under, netted camouflage. I mean, I camouflage netting. It was to do with them learning how to basically fly a plane, not land a plane, not take off a plane, but just be able to maneuver a plane. And so that was tenuous, but then even more tenuous was the invasion of Iraq, because they had nothing to do with 9/11 at all. In fact, most of the people in Iraq, and Saddam Hussein hated his neighbors who would have supported it. I mean, they were happy because I guess they saw America as the great Satan, but the reality was it wasn't Iraq that organized that. It wasn't any Iraqis on the planes who hijacked them. It was mostly Saudis. There was a guy from UAE. There was a guy from Egypt. There was a guy from Qatar, and the rest of them were all from bloody Saudi Arabia. Osama bin Laden was from Saudi Arabia. He got his money from the Bin Laden Construction Company. If you ever go to Saudi Arabia, you'll see the name Bin Laden around a lot, because they're like the equivalent of I don't know, a British building company like I don't know, Red Row Homes or something. Jay says Labour's gift, the Olympics. Yeah, wow, we're up to 10 o'clock already. Oh my word, that went quick, didn't it? Listen, I'll just quickly head over to tomorrow's papers today, so we can just have a quick look at that. But I do want to read some of your comments. Sorry, I've been a bit remiss. This isn't working. Why aren't you working? Oh, there you go. It works. Okay. What have we got in the comments? When dreams come true, SNP made their bed and they're lying in it right next to the Tories. Well, I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I still think the SNP are a decent party. I think their heart's in the right place. I think that they definitely care a lot about the people of Scotland. However, they're sort of, I don't know, their electioning. I mean, they've sat down and said, look, let's not waste our time and energy going after the Tories because they don't present a threat to us in any way, shape, or form in Scotland. In fact, the Tories are set to lose I've got 2 seats in Scotland. They're set to lose them. So they're not a threat at all. Labour are the threat, and that's why they've gone after them. It's, politics. However, this could be the last election where we actually get people voting against a party. There's going to be a lot of people in this election voting against the Tories and voting for Labour for that reason. Hopefully, the next election we'll have PR. Well, at least we'll have PR as an option in the manifesto of Labour. because it would be a big sort of constitutional change, but it means that you'll be able to vote for a party rather than against it. And I'd really like to see that. I think that would really improve democracy. I think it would really improve the way that we do things in this country. No such thing as safe seats anymore. Fantastic. Although, to be honest with you, after this election wipeout that we look like we're coming up to, I don't think there's going to be. I don't think there's going to be any such thing as a safe seat unless it's a Labour seat. Mm. Anyway, so fitting with what I've just been talking about. If I go up to the papers here, we've got Tories poll humiliation. Conservative support falls to 20%, the lowest ever rating, as government's huge failure on household income revealed. Absolutely correct. What do you reckon is in the other papers? Are they going to be talking about this? No. On the Telegraph is something slagging off the German army, I guess. Because Russia sees Scholz as a useful idiot. I wonder what they saw Boris Johnson as. I don't know. Have to ask the Telegraph. And then this thing warning against scrapping non-dom tax perks. For those few thousand people who have non-dom status, so they only have to pay 20, maybe £30,000 in tax a year instead of the 3 million that they actually owe, like Rishi Sunak's wife. And then Lord's Rwanda rebels on the side of smugglers. So that's like an absolute Nazi propaganda shit rag, the Telegraph, and that's what you have. And then there's Celia Walden saying there's no rule saying you have to leave an unfaithful spouse. So, trad wife. Jesus Christ. These cults. I said cults, just about. Tories divided over new definition of extremism. Oh, just for you, Graham. Thank you very much, David, for that. I really appreciate that. I'll give you a little super chat thing. Super chat. Thanks. It's really good of you. Thank you. Tories divided over new definition of extremism is on the Times, which is about trans rights critics and traditional Christians could be caught up in crackdown on Islamism. And then I don't know if anyone saw the attack on India Willoughby yesterday on Twitter by J.K. Rowling, the richest author in the world, just for no reason had a go at India, and it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible, and India pointed out if this was any other minority and you was using the N word or the P word, or the F word for someone who's gay, it would be flagged up. Do you know what I mean? It would be like something that would be on the front page of all the newspapers if the richest author in the world did that to one of those minorities. But for trans people, it seems to be, oh yeah, well that's all right because they shouldn't exist. Maybe I think that's the thinking. Anyway, The Guardian, doctors issue dire warnings as NHS faces biggest budget cut in 50 years, more Torying, and this is another reason why we need the Tories out, because a lot of us aren't going to survive another 5 years of this. If you are comfortable, if you are well off enough, if you have the money to just leave the country, go live somewhere else and pay for the visa to go and work and live there, that you don't have to care about this. And I know that you don't care about this. All you care about is your particular pet issue, whether it be, Gaza or the environment or whatever the one thing, or the NHS, whatever the one issue that you have, you can completely focus on that, laser focus on it. But for the rest of us, we're not going to survive another 5 years of the Tories in power, because we can't afford to go abroad for healthcare. We can't afford to leave so we can actually, earn enough money to feed our families. That's the difference. So, if you think you're going to survive that, bully for you. Continue on, I don't care. Right, here's Stella McCartney here, starting out for McCartney's parish fashion show. Parish? She's doing it in the church. And there's Paul McCartney and Ringo there. Bigfoot lives in Turkey. That's the stuff. Vickers in uproar over Church's 1 billion slavery reparations. I say it's not enough. And then France must do more with our millions to stop small boats. This is the Tory press here trying to deflect the fact that the boats haven't stopped and our immigration overall is like through the roof. It would be even more if it wasn't for the fact that it's net immigration, and so many of our brightest and best have left in the biggest brain drain this country has ever seen. And then Tory tensions as Hunt and Sunak wrestle over crunch budget, which is coming up tomorrow. So even if you're a billionaire, private healthcare doesn't do A&E, so you still need the NHS. Well, yeah, but I was thinking they could go to another country with a functioning healthcare system. I do not like the current Indian government, but I remember, or you could get your chauffeur to drive you. I do not like the current Indian government, but I remember the famines that were common until India was freed from British control and got organised. Yeah, can't argue with that, Stephanie. You know, just you can't judge a country by the actions of its government. But one thing I do know is that one group of people shouldn't be subjugated by the group of people who live next door. Whether you're talking about West Papua, or whether you're talking about Gaza, or whether you're talking about Ukraine, when you have a distinct group of people who are very, very different from everyone, the people who are invading them, let's say, and don't want to live under the yoke of their power, that's absolutely, that to me, that is the standard of civilization. That is what we should all be hoping and aspiring for. But try telling that to the leaders of Russia or China right now. They'll chase up a tree and set fire to it. Gary Arnold saying hit the like button, please. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so I'm a bit subdued. And by the way, I haven't heard about that job, so who knows? Probably haven't got it, because if I had, I would have heard by now. But yeah, listen. Just before I go, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who supported this channel over the last year. We started in March last year. And everyone who supported it before then, when it was just my channel. And please look out for each other, and if you are experiencing any kind of mental stress or anything like that, please reach out. Please talk to your friends and family, and I'm going to make a concerted effort to get onto the Labour Social Discord server more, where everyone who is a YouTube member or a patron should be able to get on. We really need to look after each other, because the Tories aren't going to look after us, and I don't think the police are going to look after us. I don't think that the judiciary have enough resources to look after us. So it's down to us, and we really need to do that. So, like I say, thank you so much for sticking with us through thick and thin. And I'll be back tomorrow at 9:30 for Morning Brew. I feeling I swapped my answer yesterday, so that's why I'm here. I should have mentioned that. But yeah, so thanks very much for all the chat. And no, it's always asking me if I'm all right. I had some really bad news the weekend. That's why I didn't do the show yesterday. So yeah, please, if any of you are feeling just, like the world's against you or whatever, please feel free to try and get in touch with me. If you go to grahamdavidhughes.com, there is a section at the bottom where you can actually send me a message directly. So use that. Otherwise, the Discord server is there, and I will start trying to use it a bit more. Sorry, I've been a bit busy the first couple of months of this year. Anyway, so yeah, until tomorrow, you take care and take care of each other. And I'll say hello, good evening, welcome.